Action for ME have released a new report focusing on special services within the UK for ME patients. On tonight's Focal Point Extra, we'll be discussing this report with Claire from Action for ME, Sally for Hope for ME and Fibro Northern Ireland, and Maeve from the Patient and Client Council. So Claire, Sally and Maeve, thank you all very much for joining me in the studio today. So Claire, we'll start off with you first. So before we get into the report, can you give me a brief rundown of the work that Action for ME do?
Action for ME is a UK charity, and we take action to end the ignorance, injustice and neglect experienced by children and adults with myalgic encephalomyelitis. It's a chronic fluctuating neurological condition that affects 250,000 people in the UK. So what we do is we provide services and support right now to help people access the information that they need to help reduce isolation, and that's done through our website, our information and support line, our expert welfare benefits advice line. Our website has forums for children and for adults. Another part of the work that we do is working with professionals and policymakers to campaign for appropriate services for people with ME, for health and social care and for benefits. And we also work collaboratively to increase investment in ME research, which is still underfunded by mainstream funders.
And this new report focuses on specialist services in the UK for patients with ME. So why did Action for ME decide to conduct this research?
So as part of our 5-year strategy, which we launched last year, we wanted to get a clear evidence base so that we could use this to campaign for improved access to services. And what the report showed is what we suspected, is that people are just not collecting enough data on the prevalence of ME. That's the number of people with ME in Northern Ireland and the rest of the UK. So how can commissioners have the right level of service if they don't know how many people need that service?
And what were some of the other key findings from the report?
So we also found that less than half of commissioners in the UK commission a specialist service for ME. So that means huge numbers of children and adults with this complex neurological condition are not getting the specialist care that they need. There are no specialist services at all in Northern Ireland. So what we also found is that instead of being referred to services where people have got really good experience of working with people with ME, instead patients are being sent to other services where people might never have worked with someone with ME before.
And Sally, we will get back to the report later, but I want to talk to you about Hope for ME and Fibro Northern Ireland. Now, this is the group that you are a part of and are the secretary of, so can you tell us more for anybody who doesn't know?
Okay, well, Hope for ME and Fibro Northern Ireland is a registered charity. It was set up by Joan McParland, who was a very severe ME case, and she spent several years completely bedbound. So she set up, first of all, a urine-worn ME fibromyalgia support group. And she started out actually very ambitiously by organising a large conference, and she brought over experts from around the world to talk to medical professionals in Northern Ireland about what ME is and about the real physiological problems that ME patients are facing. She also then started the monthly support group meetings, and eventually when we became a registered charity we changed our name to Hope for ME and Fibro Northern Ireland. So we still continue with the monthly meetings, we still continue with annual conferences where we're bringing over all of these different researchers, and we were also trying to change the NICE guidelines. NICE is the National Institute for Clinical Excellence, and their guidelines for what they call chronic fatigue syndrome, ME, actually recommending behavioural therapies as though the illness were not actually a physiological illness. And these therapies, our members are describing to us as being harmful. We had one patient describe how he was put on an exercise bike because the NICE guidelines mentioned rated exercise therapy, and he ended up falling on the floor vomiting. And this is wrong. These things shouldn't be happening. We need medical professionals, not just in Northern Ireland, but around the whole of the UK, to recognise that this is a severe physiological illness and it must not be treated simply as though it were a behavioural problem.
And you live with ME every day, so can you tell us your story? Tell us about your background. How long have you lived with it, and how did you come around to get your diagnosis?
Yes. Okay. Well, I was starting to get ill in 2011, but I was still on my feet. I was struggling. I was getting a lot of varices. And then for an unrelated issue, I had to go into hospital and have a general anaesthetic. I never recovered from that. I wasn't able to work a single day after that. A year later, I lost my job. I was a teacher. This is obviously devastating because, having been a very active and outgoing individual, suddenly I was barely able to walk beyond my front door. My husband had to learn to push me in a wheelchair, and believe me, that is quite sobering. So one of the defining features of ME is the post-exertional exacerbation of all symptoms. So even if I managed to get out for a short cup of coffee for half an hour with a friend, I would come home and the next day it would be like flu and migraine hit me all at once. On top of that, my speech would go. I developed an incredible stutter, and my coordination would go. And that's very, very distressing. But every time I did anything, this would result afterwards. Unfortunately, the doctor that I saw early on, they would only write on my sick lines at the time, chronic fatigue. I thought, that doesn't sound right. That just makes it sound as though I'm just a bit tired all the time. And that didn't describe, this cascade of horrendous symptoms that I would get after doing any minor sort of exertion. She also advised me to take 3 short brisk walks a day because that would help me. And it didn't. I was getting worse and worse. It was other patients online in the end who told me, no, Sally, you need to step back, you need to pace yourself, slow up, do less, preserve whatever energy you have. And when I started to take that advice, my rate of decline slowed up. Now, I was eventually referred to the Belfast City Hospital, and there was at that stage a fatigue clinic there, and Dr. Henry was able to put my blood and whatever else through all sorts of tests that he said were not available to GPs. So these were tests that were only available in a hospital setting, and that helped to rule out other illnesses. Now, he didn't give me a diagnosis, but he did give me some very good advice, and I remember it still. He said, do only 60% of what you can do without producing symptoms. He said, if you continue to do too much and produce this cascade of symptoms, you're going to make yourself worse and worse. You must slow up. And that was a terrible shock to me. So basically, with having no specialist services at all now, there is nowhere that doctors can refer people to for all those extra tests to rule out all the other myriad of things that could be causing fatigue-like problems, and then maybe to get the diagnosis for ME. In the end, I went privately to get a diagnosis, and that was about a year later. And I got a diagnosis then using the Canadian consensus criteria of ME CFS. I tend to drop the CFS, but chronic fatigue syndrome doesn't describe my illness.
And Claire, obviously hearing Sally's story, there are many people like this in the UK, but do we have estimated numbers?
So it's estimated that there are 250,000 people, that includes children as well, in the UK with ME. That includes 7,000 in Northern Ireland. Now that's more than the number of people thought to have Parkinson's and MS combined. So it's really outrageous that there isn't enough specialist services for those people. The estimations are based on research that is quite old now, but there is nothing newer that we can rely on to estimate those numbers.
Maeve, here in Northern Ireland we have 5 health and social care trusts, and in the report it states that 4 of these trusts didn't record any information on either diagnosis or estimated prevalence of ME. However, the Western Health and Social Care Trust diagnosed between 12 and 24 patients each year since 2012. So do we know the reasoning why only one trust recorded these rates?
Well, that's right, and in actual fact the Western Health and Social Care Trust came upon their figures because people were being diagnosed with other things. So no trust actually gathers figures for people with a diagnosis of ME alone. So the figures that we're seeing recorded for the Western Trust, while they are figures for people, they're not a true reflection of the amount of people who have ME across Northern Ireland.
And Claire, even right across the UK, almost 3/4 of NHS organisations had no data on record of people who had ME, so clearly this is a much bigger issue.
It is, and it's having a really serious impact on people with ME in the UK and across Northern Ireland. And it's absolutely outrageous that in 2017 you are coming across GPs who are having to say, I'm sorry, I've got nowhere to send you, because commissioners don't have the information they need to commission the right sort of services for these vulnerable patients.
Now, obviously, it's a different story from the Patient and Client Council, which Maeve is obviously representing here today. They found that 7,000 cases of ME through their findings. So can you tell us how these findings were achieved?
7,000 is an extrapolation from that figure of 250,000 in the UK. Much more research needs to be done on all aspects of ME. I mean, the priority is the biology of the condition, so we can understand the cause or the causes, which might lead to more effective treatments and ultimately a cure. But we also need to better understand how many people have got ME and how they get it in the first place. So at the minute, it's an estimate based on the data that we have.
Maeve, while we're talking about the council, can you tell us exactly about the work that they do?
Our role is to hear about the experiences that people are having who are using the health and social care services, and to encourage and make sure that the people who are providing the services are hearing from people who are using the services about what's good about different services, what's working, particularly what's not working, and to work together to make sure that changes to services involve people who are using our services. So where we're looking to improve or change a service, that the system is asking people who are very familiar through their experience of the service what's working and what's not working. So it's really about we hear a lot about co-production now in terms of trying to co-produce our services to make them better and stronger for people. But this is really about making sure that the people who provide the services are hearing from people who access the services about what it's really like, what it's truly like.
And Claire, it states in the report that Northern Ireland has 0 special services for ME patients. So what is available for them if we don't have a special service?
So in the UK as a whole, we found 25 different services that people with ME are being referred to. And those are not specialist services for ME, they're services that people happen to be referred to. And that applies in Northern Ireland. So according to our data, people with ME in Northern Ireland are being referred to neurology, physiotherapy, occupational therapy, rheumatology, a number of other services. Now, it may be that the practitioner they see in that service happens to have experience of ME, but that is absolutely no guarantee, because it's not a specialist service designed for this particular patient group. And that means that they are missing out on the chance to get really expert advice from somebody who understands their condition properly.
And Sally, in your experience, have you been referred to any of the services that Claire has just talked about, and have they worked?
Well, as I mentioned before, I was referred to the old fatigue clinic in Belfast City Hospital, and as I say, that was useful. But once I had been given that advice, do only 60% of what you can do without producing symptoms, there was nothing further that they could offer me. In fact, I actually, when I was sent back another year, and I had to sit there and wait to see somebody who basically said, well, how are you now? Okay, well, there's nothing more we can do, goodbye. And I thought, there's no point in me expending what little energy I had to get up to the hospital for an appointment like that. And that really is because at the moment there isn't really any good treatment yet for ME. Everything is really geared at the moment towards damage limitation, towards not getting worse. And that 60% advice was the best advice to try and slow me up, to do less, so that I wasn't going to be causing more and more damage by trying to overexert myself, push myself to achieve things. And the fact that 15,000 people signed the ME Association petition during the 2-week consultation period that NICE gave us to respond to their consultation document about the NICE guidelines, and those 15,000 were signing to say, we feel that the NICE guidelines are unfit for purpose. Now, I think NICE should be listening to that, and I think they need to review those guidelines. They need to remove everything behavioural from it, except if it's just condition management. Counselling to help us adjust to a lower level is good, but this graded exercise therapy or cognitive behaviour therapy being used to try and force us to do more, to try and force a change in our condition, this illness is not behavioural. This is not just because we are deconditioned because we didn't do as much for a few months when we were ill.
And in June this year, you actually had success with all 365 GP practices in Northern Ireland. So can you tell us more about this?
Right, well, our most recent conference we called Seeking Solutions. And at that conference, we were very fortunate that Dr. Ian Clements, who is the chair of the Health and Social Care Board here, attended the conference. And he was really quite surprised by the number of physiological abnormalities that were being reported in the metabolism of people with ME. In particular, the Krebs cycle doesn't seem to work properly. And for any of you who know, the Krebs cycle provides energy to the cells in order to operate. So if that isn't working properly, then it's no wonder that people ME patients are not functioning properly. So at the end of that conference, he told us that he would communicate what he had learned at our conference to all 365 GP surgeries in Northern Ireland. We're very excited about that, but we're hoping that that's going to happen very, very soon, probably by the end of the summer.
And hearing Sally's story, it almost seems like there is still a lack of information when it comes to ME.
There's a lack of information, but there's also so much misinformation. And I think that that's in some ways more worrying, because I think that because of the lack of information, people have created their own information or their own answers or their own solutions, and we rely too heavily and too much on people who have had experience of ME in terms of information. There should be a plan to develop information, and we need to work with the people who are to influence people who are providing the services and use that information. But if you think about some of the other diseases that affect the numbers of people that are affected by ME, you think of MS and you think of Parkinson's, we can all immediately think, oh yes, I know a bit about Parkinson, or I know a bit about MS. The amount of time and money and effort that's gone into produce information about cancer services, cardiac services. So we need to be fair, and we need to apply the same rigour and the same energy to making sure that information is available for people with ME.
And Claire, now that the report is complete, what's the next step?
We are really clear that everyone with ME has the right to access appropriate healthcare that best meets their needs wherever they live and whatever their age. So we have set out 2 projects off the back of the report that we want to do. We want to work with all the trust boards and commissioners in the UK to improve how they collect data on ME, so that will help inform the services that they commission, because they'll know what the level of need is, and it is high. And the other thing that we want to do is to work with people with ME, with organisations like the Patient and Client Council, like Hope for Fibro and ME Northern Ireland, and also with health professionals to develop or explore how we can develop a blueprint for services that are patient-led, so that when commissioners come to setting up services, they can use this blueprint. And the patient-led bit is really important. They've talked about co-production, and that is essential for these services, because otherwise they won't meet the needs of people with ME.
And Sally, because you live with ME every single day, what would you like to see happen in Northern Ireland, especially within the next 5 years, because of this report?
Well, in Northern Ireland, obviously, we have no services, so it would be great to see some services being offered. What I would like to see is a medically led clinic that could first of all offer a good management strategy for ME patients that could help them moderate how much they do in order to prevent them from getting worse. I would not be happy if that clinic was promoting graded exercise therapy and cognitive behaviour therapy, because both of those are pushing patients to try and do more and more and push their levels of activity up. And in my experience, and the experience of many other patients, that is damaging. So we'd be better with no clinic than a clinic that was going to push patients to do more. However, if we did get a clinic, if we get the right person leading that clinic, it would be fantastic if it would also be proactive in running medical trials, such as maybe for the drug that I took. I took it off-label. I took it as a chance thing. It might work for me. I was fortunate. It doesn't work for everybody. So why did it work for me? Those are the sort of answers that we need, so that then a drug could maybe be targeted at one particular cohort of ME patients. We need the research though. We need funding to help do that research. I'd like them to be proactive in actually also educating other medical professionals within Northern Ireland. There is a perception that ME is not really very serious, that it is a lifestyle sort of burnout. We need to change that perception. We need everybody at the ground level, in the hospitals, in the doctors' surgeries, recognising that ME patients have very real needs, that if they say the environment is too noisy, that they have somewhere else quieter for that patient to wait. So that sort of thing, I think that level of education would be very, very important. Also the idea of a mobile unit that would be able to go out and visit the most severely affected, to take, in other words, the hospital really to them, to prevent the hospital, them having to go into hospital where they really are going to be inundated with sensations that they can't cope with, that are going to then make their condition worse. So those are the sorts of things we need. We also need, I think, something that would help the children. At the moment, children get ME as well. And the big problem with children is that they then start missing school. And when they start missing school, social services come in. And because the doctors at the moment don't understand ME, they're not giving the right advice to the social services. And so we end up with children and their parents being under investigation from the social services. And we're getting allegations that the parents are withholding them from school. And it's all very distressing when in actual fact those children really can't do anything. They are severely ill, and then the parents are being accused of not sending them to school. So we need something that's going to actually protect those children and protect those families, and that education that's going to go out to all the GPs, that's going to help with that, I hope, so that the children and their families are protected by the medical profession from these false allegations that are being made against them.
And Maeve, what do the Patient and Client Council plan to do in order to help ME patients get the service that they deserve?
I think that the role that we have played within that is to keep this on the radar and to support all of the people who are journeying through this, to support them, to make sure that their voice is heard. And we also feel that the whole area of advice and information is lacking, and we'll work really hard to make sure that the advice that it's out there is the right advice, and that it's accredited and it's easy for people to understand, because quite often advice that's produced is hard to it's hard to understand because of the language and the jargon that's used. So we'll make sure that that doesn't happen, that people can understand the information that's available to them.
And as we finish up the discussion today, if anybody wants to find out any more information on the Patient and Client Council, where can they go?
Well, they can access us through our website, and we actually have information on our website about accessing Sally's organisation as well. So there's lots and lots of information for people there.
Perfect. And Sally, if anybody wants to find out any more information about Hope for ME and Fibro Northern Ireland, where can they go?
Well, we have a website, hopeformefibro.org, and we also have a Facebook page and a Facebook group. So if they just type in Hope for ME and Fibro Northern Ireland into Facebook, that will come up. And we offer quite a lot of support to both members and non-members through quite a lively Facebook group. We also have meetings on the first Tuesday of every month in the Mourne Country Hotel in Newry, and we have various speakers each month, so everybody's very welcome.
And finally, Claire, if anybody wants to find out any more information on Action for ME or the report itself, where can they go?
So if anybody wants to ask questions about the report or get involved in any of the work that's going to come out of it, or just simply seek support and information about ME, they can do that through our website, which is actionforme.org.uk. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter and LinkedIn, also Action for ME, or you can call us on 0117 927 9551.
Well, that's great. So Claire, Sally and Maeve, thank you all very much for joining me in the studio.
Thank you.
Thank you.